Caligulio returned to the capital expecting ruins, fires, screams, a city still bleeding from war. What he found instead was something far more dangerous. Order. Not the clean kind. Not peace. Controlled chaos. Every street breathing, every district tense, every citizen watching to see which way the empire would tilt. The war was over. The dead were counted. The enemy was gone. And yet Caligulio knew this was the moment empires actually collapsed. So he did the one thing generals rarely do after victory. He didn't rebuild. He commanded. Hundreds of thousands of loyal soldiers were redeployed, not to intimidate, not to conquer, but to hold. Intersections, granaries, transport routes, supply depots, every pressure point where unrest liked to grow roots. Protests were smothered before they learned how to scream. Whispers died before they became slogans. And the most dangerous group of all, the soldiers dreaming of defecting to Tempest, were not punished. They were given time. Don't make up your mind right now. Rimuru's words spread faster than orders ever could. Choice, delayed but guaranteed, proved stronger than chains. It wasn't force that kept the capital steady. It was restraint. And restraint, Caligulio had learned the hard way, was far harder to maintain than violence. The true enemy arrived exactly on schedule. The nobility. They didn't riot. They didn't revolt. They did something far worse. They demanded audiences. Veiled threats wrapped in polite smiles, legal objections disguised as tradition, bloodline arguments sharpened just enough to draw blood without triggering retaliation. Every conversation drained Caligulio more than any battlefield ever had. Minutes played diplomat, absorbing blow after blow. Krishna applied pressure where pressure was allowed. Together, they prevented open rebellion, but barely. Then Tempest intervened, not with armies, not with declarations, with one demon. Testarossa, Blanc. Her arrival didn't announce itself with terror. No screams, no executions, no displays of dominance, just a presence that rewrote the emotional gravity of the room. She was given one task, calm a defeated populace, and instead of feeding on fear, she did something that unsettled even hardened officers. She governed emotions. If you eat up all of someone's emotions, that usually has a bad effect on them. Fear didn't vanish. It softened. Grief didn't disappear. It loosened its grip, anger lost momentum, dissent lost its rhythm. The city didn't feel pacified. It felt exhausted, in the way a storm-tossed body finally stops thrashing and starts floating. Caligulio never forgot the second half of her explanation, the part she delivered calmly, casually, that there were cleaner alternatives. He understood then how thin the line was between mercy and annihilation, and how effortlessly she could step over it. Stability, Testarossa decided, required legitimacy, and legitimacy required spectacle. Thus, the coronation. Masayuki's first true appearance as emperor wasn't staged like a political ceremony. It was staged like a revelation. Doubts over bloodlines never reached the podium. Velgrynd erased them. By the laws of our imperial household, I hereby name Masayuki, the hero, as our new emperor. Her cardinal aura swept the capital. The sacred volcano answered, erupting in a thunderous salute that should have erased the city from the map. It didn't. Molten devastation stopped at the capital's edge, held back by nothing visible. No barrier, no magic circle, just will, no illusion, no trick. Only the guardian dragon's decision. Awe preceded understanding. Then Masayuki's legend ignited the crowd. His name rose, not in chaos, but in unison. His unique power fed on belief, amplified it, looped it back until faith hardened into certainty. In that moment, resistance didn't die by the sword, it suffocated under consensus. Order returned, the people unified, and Emperor Masayuki was no longer merely crowned. He was accepted. Hope crept back into the capital, slowly, carefully. Grief remained, but it no longer paralyzed. Shops reopened, schedules returned, life resumed its quiet insistence on continuing. For Caligulio, this normalization felt like a victory greater than any battlefield triumph. But peace, he knew, was provisional. With Masayuki enthroned, the nobility stirred again. Audience requests flooded in. Titles, after all, did not care for job descriptions. Relief came from the last source he expected. Testarossa. Her assessment was delivered with unsettling calm. The nobles weren't any problem at all. Soon after, the demands stopped. Just stopped. Pressed for answers, Caligulio learned how thoroughly she had mapped the empire's power structure. 3 factions: the military, the entrenched old nobility, the countryside lords. They were not equal threats. The military faction was already secure. Its leader's defiance had been nothing more than wounded pride and uncertainty. It's something weak people do all the time. How she knew was never explained. The countryside nobles were simpler, practical. They cared about stability, food, and peace, not dynastic purity. With rural regions already calm, opposing the new order offered them nothing. Behind it all lay invisible work. Midnight investigations, unassailable infiltration, secrets quietly leveraged into cooperation. Caligulio sensed the depth of what he wasn't being told, and wisely chose not to ask. Results mattered more than methods. As political pressure faded, one truth became undeniable. The empire was no longer held together by fear or tradition alone. It was being stabilized by understanding, of people, of power, of motivation. Then Testarossa dismantled his last illusion, the economy. Being lectured on trade policy by a demon should have felt absurd. Instead, it felt humiliating. The underground trade. Her words cut through decades of certainty. What Caligulio had trusted as order was managed contradiction. Black markets, foreign trade, forbidden practices. They hadn't survived through failure of enforcement. They had survived through tolerance. Lieutenant Kondo had understood this. Stability, not purity, had been the goal. He did let it slide because it wasn't a bad thing at all. Merchants needed freedom. Regional lords needed outlets. Absolute control would have strangled survival. Groups like Cerberus weren't aberrations. They were pressure valves, necessary evils, observed, not erased. Testarossa had used that logic with surgical precision. By promising legalized free trade and integration into Rimuru's rail network, she gave countryside nobles what they lacked. Access, liquidity, a future. Wealth would no longer pool near the capital. It would flow outward. Their loyalty followed naturally. The revelation humbled Caligulio. Tempest wasn't rebuilding, it was restructuring, fixing imbalances the empire had never been strong enough to address. Money, labor, foresight, aligned where once there had been neglect. Only one faction remained, old money. And even there, Testarossa was untroubled. The true criminals were already gone, cleansed years ago by Kondo's unseen hand. What remained was manageable, so manageable that she had already scheduled a meeting to finalize their submission. Caligulio stopped questioning her methods. Faced with this gulf in vision and execution, he did the only sensible thing left. He listened. And he followed. The reception room was tense by design. 4 figures, 4 axes of power. Minutes, political authority. Caligulio, military weight. Testarossa, Tempest's inscrutable influence. Across from them sat Mithra Hilmenard, old money incarnate. His power wasn't earned through office or arms, it was inherited. Born of the woman who bore Emperor Ludora, Mithra was the emperor's half-brother, legitimacy so absolute it bent rooms around him. Cross him, and you didn't die quickly. You starved. Caligulio understood the imbalance instantly. He could defeat Mithra in combat, and still lose everything that mattered. This was a monster shaped by politics, not violence. Relief came from Testarossa's presence. Compared to Mithra, even this demon felt stabilizing. Fear shifted direction, yet doubt crept in. She had said most nobles were no problem. If Mithra was the exception, why was he still alive? Kondo would never have spared a true criminal. That contradiction gnawed at Caligulio. Then the negotiations began. Mithra opened with hostility, branding the meeting a coup. Minutes countered with legality. Velgryn's name entered the room like a blade. The truth followed. Velgrynd was no ally of the empire. She obeyed only Masayuki. And if he wished it, the country would burn. This wasn't leverage. It was reality. Minutes shifted the battlefield with a single question. Do you want to rule the empire or help us stabilize it? The offer was genuine and infuriating. Masayuki hadn't sought the throne, but abandoning it would fracture the empire. Velgrynd would leave. Tempest's support would vanish. Collapse would follow. Testarossa sealed it. Rimuru's aid hinged on Masayuki's position, not ambition. This wasn't usurpation. It was containment. Mithra understood. Behind the legend lay a man who never wanted power. He wanted quiet, to paint, to raise his children, to keep his family intact. His reputation had been born of silence, not cruelty. Fear had moved for him when he did nothing at all. Now, bloodline meant nothing. Soul did. Defiance would not end his house. It would end lives. So Mithra chose, not conquest, not rebellion, family. As he prepared to speak, Caligulio realized something terrifying. This empire was no longer ruled by tradition, fear, or strength. It was ruled by restraint. And restraint, once mastered, was unstoppable.